There is an idea of a Patrick Bateman, some kind of abstraction, but there is no real me, only an entity, something illusory. And though I can hide my cold gaze, and you can shake my hand and feel flesh gripping yours, and maybe you can even sense our lifestyles are probably comparable, I simply am not there.
American Psycho is truly one of those rare films that gets better as it ages. When I first saw it, I have to admit, I wasn't too keen on it. I wasn't sure what the film was trying to be or what kind of message it was trying to convey. The film is equal parts dark comedy, character study, violent expose, and social commentary, and if you try to lump the film into just one of these categories, it can fall pretty flat. After repeated viewings, however, I see the film for what it truly is, a satirical masterpiece. So why do I love this movie? Whoa. That's gotta be a meme or something. All right, hold on a sec. All right, sorry about that. Anyway, why do I love this movie so much? It's not just because of the hilarious quotes or the star-making performance by Christian Bale.
Because I want to fit in. In the morning, if my face is a little puffy, I'll put on an ice pack while doing my stomach crunches. I can do 1,000 now. I'm on the verge of tears by the time we arrive at a spas, since I'm positive we won't have a decent table. But we do. And relief washes over me in an awesome way. Oh, your compliment was sufficient, Lewis. You like Huey Lewis in the news? Do you like Phil Collins? Did you know that Whitney Houston's debut LP, called simply Whitney Houston, had 4 #1 singles on it?
What keeps me coming back to the film is its ambiguity and how the film can take on different thematic meanings based on which lens you choose to view it through. Now, there are a number of themes you can gather from the film, and all of them contribute to a darkly hilarious and surprisingly impactful viewing experience. A number of themes can be seen from a face value interpretation of the movie, like oblivion and indifference, appearance versus reality, and most obvious of all, greed. But I think the motif that I find most relevant and impactful from American Psycho is its commentary on personal versus collective identity. I feel that viewing the story with this theme in mind provides the most evocative interpretation of the film, particularly after you've seen the ending a few times. So, what is collective identity, and what does it have to do with American Psycho? But before we get into all that, let's quickly recap what happens during the plot. Set in Manhattan in what is presumed to be the late 80s into the early 90s, or the yuppie era, we follow the life of Patrick Bateman, a Wall Street yuppie with a purposefully nondescript job, whose financial success is only matched with his greed, obsession with material commodities, and, well, himself. We learn early on in the film that in addition to his lust for aesthetics and wealth, Bateman is, in fact, a serial killer. It's actually important to note that up until this point, Bateman has succeeded in keeping his killing instincts separate from his professional endeavors. Bateman is also portrayed as an incredibly envious person who values social status and the appearance of wealth as paramount. An example of this behavior can be seen when he takes one of his mistresses, incredibly intoxicated, mind you, to dinner and lies about which restaurant he has taken her to, when she is sitting right there with him.
This is Dorothea?
Yes, dear. Courtney, you're gonna have the peanut butter soup with smoked duck.
In the following scene, he meets one of his colleagues, Paul Allen, for the first time. During his introduction to Bateman, Allen mistakes him for one of his colleagues, Marcus Halberstram.
Hello, Halberstram. Nice tie. How the hell are you?
Alan has mistaken me for this dickhead Marcus Halberstram. It seemed logical because Marcus also works at PNP and in fact does the same exact thing I do. He also has a penchant for Valentino suits and Oliver Peoples glasses. Marcus and I even go to the same barber, although I have a slightly better haircut.
Instead of just correcting him, Bateman maintains the facade by pretending he is Halberstram, only to see how it will play out. Bateman begins to grow incredibly jealous of Alan for something as frivolous as a superior business card and a restaurant reservation.
Look at that subtle off-white coloring. The tasteful thickness of it. Oh my god. It even has a watermark.
Can do. I got an 8:30 res at Dorsey. Great sea urchin ceviche.
Dorsey on Friday night. How do you swing that?
Patrick's jealousy of Paul makes it increasingly more difficult for him to keep his murderous tendencies buried, or as he eloquently puts it,
Something horrible is happening inside of me, and I don't know why. My nightly bloodlust has overflowed into my days. I feel lethal, on the verge of frenzy. I think my mask of sanity is about to slip.
He then schedules a business dinner with Alan, posing as Halberstram, proceeds to get him incredibly intoxicated, lures him to his apartment, delivers an insightful monologue about cheesy 80s pop rock, and then murders him with an axe.
Paul!
Following the murder of Paul Allen, Patrick breaks into his apartment and begins to lure unsuspecting victims to their death there, as well as store the corpses of his dead victims in Paul Allen's closet as if they were as objective and detached as his $4,000 suits. This goes on for weeks as his murderous tendencies lead him into an unexplained murderous rampage, killing civilians, hookers, even police officers, until Bateman reaches a point where he is forcibly impelled to confess what he has done to his own lawyer, convinced that he will soon be caught.
Howard, it's Bateman, Patrick Bateman. You're my lawyer, so I think you should know I've killed a lot of people.
The next day, Bateman plans to dispose of the numerous bodies that he's been keeping at Paul Allen's apartment. However, upon returning to Paul's apartment to retrieve the collection of bodies, he finds that not only are all the bodies missing, but the apartment has been cleared out and listed for potential buyers. Confused and shaken by a cold exchange with a realtor, Patrick leaves and desperately cries for help from his secretary, only to find out where his colleagues will be having their next meal. Upon arriving at the bar to meet his colleagues, Patrick spots his lawyer Howard and proceeds to ask him about his confession over the phone last night. The lawyer surprisingly thinks that Bateman's ranting and ravings were a hilarious joke, and he even mistakes Bateman for one of his other colleagues.
Jesus, yes, that was hilarious. That was you, wasn't it?
Yeah, naturally.
Bateman killing Alan and the escort girls. That's fabulous. That's rich.
What exactly do you mean?
The message you left. By the way, Davis, how's Cynthia? You're still seeing her, right?
Bateman again confesses to Howard, detailing exactly what he did to Paul Allen.
Listen very, very carefully. I killed Paul Allen. And I liked it.
Only to have his lawyer respond with,
But that's simply not possible.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
Because I had dinner with Paul Allen twice in London. Just 10 days ago.
No, you didn't.
Now, if you'll excuse me.
Baffled and confused, Patrick sits back down with his colleagues and begins to reflect on what he has just learned. The film's final moments play out with the audience wondering if what we just witnessed actually occurred, or if it played out as a fantasy inside the mind of a delusional psychopath. In either sense, Patrick accepts that his perception of reality is meaningless, and realizes that his own existence is as empty and vapid as he is.
But even after admitting this, there is no catharsis. My punishment continues to elude me, and I gain no deeper knowledge of myself. No new knowledge can be extracted from my telling. This confession has meant nothing.
Now, if you're at all like me, I'm sure the first time you saw this movie, you probably thought, what the hell did I just watch? And again, I was not crazy about this film when I first saw it. I thought the ending was derivative, and an insightful commentary about the Wall Street yuppie mentality was made sour by a simple appearance versus reality narrative. However, I now see this ending is the perfect embodiment of the central theme of collective identity that is present within the plot. First, we have to address the ambiguity involved with the ending. So clearly, we're given two choices. Either Patrick committed all of the murders shown, and most importantly, Paul Allen, or he didn't, and the scenes of murder that we saw were merely delusions of violence within Bateman's mind. After viewing this movie many times, I think that Patrick undoubtedly committed the murders, and everything that we saw in the film actually happened as presented. Except, of course, things like the ATM needing a stray cat. So, if we assume that Patrick actually killed all the people in the movie, then how do we even begin to explain the ending? After all, the lawyer makes it clear he had dinner with Paul Allen in London, or did he? To rationalize this, we only have to recall that throughout the film, there is constant misidentification.
Is that Reed Robinson over there? Are you freebasing or what? That's not Robinson. Well, who is it then? It's Paul Allen.
It's not Paul Allen. Paul Allen's on the other side of the room over there.
Who's he with?
Hello, Halberstram. Nice tie. How the hell are you?
Allen has mistaken me for this dickhead, Marcus Halberstram.
Evelyn. Great ass. Goes out with that loser Patrick Bateman. What a dork.
Another martini, Paul.
He wasn't with Paul Allen.
Who was he with?
He was at Atlantis with Craig McDermott, Frederick Dibble, Harry Newman, George Butner, and you. By the way, Davis, how's Cynthia? You're still seeing her, right?
Wait, Harold.
This constant recurrence in the plot does not mean that everyone in the movie is stupid. The world that we are presented in American Psycho is one in which everyone is part of this materialistic yuppie culture. Everyone is easily mistaken for someone else, or more interestingly put, everyone that is presented has their personal identity synonymous with that of their collective identity. So, what do I mean by this? Personal identity is fairly self-explanatory. It's the way in which we identify ourselves apart from others. It's what makes us unique, independent actors on the earth. There have been many interpretations of personal identity in the realm of metaphysics and identity philosophy. But for now, let's not worry about the mechanics of what the unique identifiers are in personal identity. Collective identity, then, is the antithesis of what makes a person unique. It's a shared sense of belonging to a certain group. And this goes way beyond something like kinship. Collective identity is the phenomenon in which a group can be defined by a common set of characteristics, immaterial or material. Now, although the terms are similar, collective identity and groupthink are not the same thing. Groupthink refers to simply the alignment of beliefs within a certain group. But collective identity forms the very beliefs that are aligned in a group. Think about your favorite sports team. Once you identify with a certain sports team, you define yourself as a fan of said team. There's an unspoken pledge you take as a Red Sox fan to hate the Yankees. It's what identifies you as a Red Sox fan. Of course, we as independently acting humans are what give power to any instance of collective identity. By definition, collective identity is just the assembly of many, many, many personal identities into a universal one. But we as individuals retain our personal identity regardless of the movement of the collective identity. But what if the collective identity became something more encompassing? What if the group's collective identity merged with that of the personal? And if personal identity and collective identity merged, how would that look? It's a thought exercise that I find fascinating, and it really manifests in American Psycho. So with this theme in mind, the merging of collective identity and personal identity, let's think about the plot. Is it really that surprising that virtually everyone in the film looks alike? Is it that surprising that everyone in the film is mistaken for one person at some point in the film? This is not just a case of someone dressing the same way or going to the same barber. In the world of Wall Street yuppies that is presented in American Psycho, all of these go-getting, well-groomed men look exactly the same. And even further than that, they behave exactly the same. They think exactly the same. They have all of the same wants and all of the same needs: power, money, influence, and they have disdain for those who have a higher perceived status of wealth than they do. All of these commonalities, combined with all of the instances of misidentification that occur in the film, suggest that how these characters think and feel as independent humans is meaningless. They have lost what makes them distinguishable from one another in both an aesthetic and immaterial sense. And in this way, the collective identity, the egotistical, greedy, and vapid mentality of this group of people has taken the place of what makes each of them unique. This point is made over and over again in the film, starting with Patrick's opening monologue, which ironically is recited during his morning grooming ritual.
There is an idea of a Patrick Bateman, some kind of abstraction, but there is no real me, only an entity, something illusory. I have all the characteristics of a human being: flesh, blood, skin, hair, but not a single clear, identifiable emotion, except for greed and disgust.
The most explicit example of this comes in the business card scene, where we are shown a series of business cards that look pretty much identical.
Picked them up from the printers yesterday.
Good coloring.
That's bone. And the lettering is something called Cillian Braille.
It's very cool, Bateman, but that's nothing. Look at this.
That is really nice. You ain't seen nothing yet. Raised lettering. Pale nimbus. White.
Let's see Paul Allen's card.
This scene perfectly symbolizes that the unique identities presented bleed into one another, regardless of any slight differences there are. They are all essentially the same. Same job, same title, same card layout, and ostensibly same identity. I think this over-exaggeration of collective identity in American Psycho is precisely the reason why this film is such a masterpiece of satire. This universality of ideas and desires in this assembly of people not only destroys individuality, but it goes even further and makes them indifferent towards the loss of personal identity. It doesn't matter what you independently think and feel in this world when your entire life is comprised of collective identity. As the film suggests, you could even be a serial killer, and no one would notice, or no one would even care. So, with all of this laid out, back to my original point. What does all this mean? How does the ending of the film perfectly embody my long, drawn-out explanation of collective identity? Simple. Patrick actually murdered Paul Allen. His lawyer, Howard, did not see Paul Allen in London. He mistook him for someone else when he was supposedly in London. Patrick owns up to killing him, detailing every explicit detail, and yet he's not taken seriously by his own lawyer. Even he is ingrained in this culture of collective identity that we've seen throughout the entire film. And because of this pervasive sense of collective identity, Patrick is immediately absolved of all the sins he has committed. The collective identity of Wall Street yuppies that he has become defined by has allowed him to do whatever he pleases, for no one is even concerned about the actions of a singular entity. All that matters is universal appearance, and in that way, Patrick realizes that his own life is even more devoid of catharsis than he thought. I mean, think about it. A lie that he constructed to give himself an alibi for murdering Paul is the very thing that pardons him from his crime.
Hi, this is Paul. Been called away to London for a few days. Meredith, I'll call you when I get back. Hasta la vista, baby.
And this world is so detached that when the collection of bodies is assumed to be discovered at Paul Allen's apartment, all that matters is the fact that it's a beautiful apartment overlooking Central Park, and its material value supersedes the moral value of the collection of corpses of Wall Street yuppies. It's rather ironic that Bateman is the only person in the film to realize this, considering that he is a murderous sociopath. And this is made even more clear following his realization by a very simple line.
Brother, look, he presents himself as this harmless old codger, but inside...
But inside doesn't matter.
American Psycho's satire on collective identity and greed is something that has truly influenced the way that I see the transcendent nature of film. A movie that is so inherently ridiculous can have a lasting message about the loss of personal identity in the world that we live in today. By the end of the film, we realize that Patrick's identity is only composed of the worst elements of humanity: greed, disgust, hate, envy, hunger, lust, vanity, and indifference. To me, it's a cautionary film of sorts, telling the viewer that superficiality only leads to contempt, and while it's an over-exaggerated case, we can learn to be wary of the implications of collective identity and not to lose what makes us unique, for an existence based solely on collective identity is one that is cold and meaningless, a point that Patrick drives home as the film comes to a conclusion.
I want no one to escape. But even after admitting this, there is no catharsis. My punishment continues to elude me, and I gain no deeper knowledge of myself. No new knowledge can be extracted from my telling. This confession has meant nothing.
Thanks a lot for watching this video. American Psycho is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I really couldn't think of a better movie to start this channel off with. So I really enjoyed making it, and if you have any suggestions for me in the future, please let me know. Like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time. This is Johnny, the Lone Chemist, signing off.